The true startup of California citrus came with a single biological event, the successful introduction of the Washington navel orange. In 1873, the U.S. Department of Agriculture imported budwood from Brazil. One of the budwood recipients was a woman named Eliza Tibbets, who planted 2 trees in her yard that survived. One tree still survives today, and that changed everything. Unlike earlier seed-grown oranges, the Washington navel could be reproduced through grafting, ensuring uniform fruit quality. The climate of the inland Southern California proved nearly perfect. The fruit was sweet, visually attractive, and most importantly, could survive shipment to eastern markets. As you enter the California Citrus State Historic Park, you're greeted by a replica of an old-fashioned roadside fruit stand. More than half of the 250 acres that the park covers are dedicated to citrus of all kinds, a whole variety of different kinds. You sign in at that kiosk by the gate, and I think it cost me just a little under $7 in order to be in the park for 2 hours. So you pass the giant orange, the kiosk, and head all the way down to the visitor center. Check that out for a few minutes, and then you can head off and just hike anywhere you want within the park. Even walking within the orchard is really fun. I visited the park in the middle of January, and you could tell by the fruit on the trees that it was just about harvest time. These smudge pots were used in the orchards to keep the fruit warm, the trees warm. I'll show you even a little more about them in a moment. The displays in the visitor center were excellent. The docents were funny and friendly and really helpful in explaining the history, not just the history locally, but even where did citrus fruit come from? How did it find its way to the Western Hemisphere? How did it find its way to California? And even though initially citrus grew from seeds, it wasn't until, as we indicated, the buds came from Brazil that the citrus industry truly blew up in California. Of course, if you're in a citrus orchard, you desperately want to be tasting things. And so this is fun that they had that available in the visitor center. There's a little walkway that takes you up to supposedly one of the most beautiful parts of the park. So when you're in the park, you're not supposed to pick any citrus, but there are docents around, and a docent gave me a nice little tangerine. So here's my first taste. Wow, that is fabulous. Just what you would hope from a beautiful place like this. Wow. As I stated earlier, these smudge pots would be in the orchards, and they would burn oil or whatever else they could find in them in order to warm up the orchards. You can imagine what the smoke must have been like. And here's a painting I did of the smudge pots for my daughter, something she wanted to remember about living in Southern California. As you're going along, the signs tell you what you're looking at. Sour orange. Here's Citrus macrophylla, whatever that is. It's like growing along the ground almost. And this is the rough lemon. Citrus does not tolerate drought very well, and Southern California is semi-arid. So the expansion of citrus depended upon irrigation, and irrigation depended upon organization. In places like Riverside, Redland, San Bernardino, growers formed mutual water companies. As you see around the top of this hill, there's lots of other trees. And what are these? These are actually avocado trees. And the docent told me that is now the money maker for this park, is the harvesting and selling of avocados. This region later became known as the Inland Empire and became the citrus heartland. Groves were planted in gridded patterns. Roads were laid out between them. Entire towns oriented themselves around packing houses and rail depots. Here's another one of these signs that give you information about these big, beautiful palm trees. But citrus really became an industry the moment it could leave California intact. The completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in the late 19th century allowed oranges to reach Chicago, New York, and Boston in under 2 weeks. I can remember my father telling me as a boy in Philadelphia, his favorite Christmas present would be he'd always get a fresh navel orange from California. At that time, packing houses emerged as industrial facilities. Fruit was washed, sorted, graded, wrapped in tissue paper, and standardization was everything. And the Sunkist company, which led the way, did not just sell oranges, it seemed to sell an idea. National advertising campaigns linked oranges to health, sunshine, vitality, and California itself. And oranges were marketed as essential to breakfast, vitamin-rich, and modern. Citrus also shaped California's settlement patterns. Developers used orange groves to sell land. The citrus industry, therefore, fed directly into California's population growth, and in some ways actually led to the decline of the citrus industry. This building is the beautiful Sunkist Center. There's this gorgeous event center here, and you can rent it for meetings or parties or weddings. So what a beautiful spot to host your event. Oh my goodness. The land increased in value so greatly that it was in some ways better for people to sell their land. And so even in the town where I live recently, 100-year-old orange groves are being decimated in order to build houses. So the destruction of the citrus industry continues even today. At harvest time, you will always see boxes like these. Sometimes they're wooden, and these are what the citrus is collected in and then ultimately shipped. You'll also see these citrus picking ladders everywhere. You can't buy fruit within the park, but when you leave, go across the street. There's lots of fruit vendors that have fresh fruit from the park. Well, I started with a navel orange. I figured I might as well finish one. The guy who was a docent at the place told me that navel oranges are called navel because they look like I have a belly button. I don't know about that, but anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'm going to enjoy my navel orange. Yummy. And I hope to see you on the next one.